Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering, as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. So I heard on a podcast the other day somebody saying that the biggest problem in relationships is people not listening to each other. And I reflected on that and thought, okay, how long have we known this fact or piece of information or opinion? How long have we known this? A long time. So why is it still a misuse? So I decided to investigate a little bit in my own life and my own reflections. I remembered an incident a while back. I was in a relationship, and one day I said to him, sometimes I don't feel like you're listening to me. He responded, he was angry when I said this and immediately said, don't ever tell me that I don't listen. I'm a very good listener. I always listen. I was shocked, and I never said that to him again because I understood in that relationship that wasn't acceptable to him to say that I didn't feel like he was listening. But I thought about it more and thought, I wonder if there's some sort of misunderstanding going on here. Because when I said to him, sometimes I feel like you're not listening to me, what I was hoping was for him to say something like, oh, sorry about that. Is there something you'd like me to hear? I was hoping to open up a dialogue with it. But clearly I opened up a shutdown. That was the complete opposite of what I had in mind. So I thought, I wonder whether he's got a different definition of listening to the one that I have. And I also wondered, I wonder if what I really wanted to say to him was something different from, I don't think you're listening sometimes. And I actually tried something out with him, which was to listen to him very, very closely over the next period of time. And by doing that, he started sharing some things with me about his ways of relating with other human beings. And it turned out that something he had put a lot of energy into in his life was trying to understand broadly how people work, how people's minds work, how people's psychology works, how people's emotional dynamic works. In theory, it's in a general sense. So then when he was relating to somebody else, he was then carrying into that relationship a whole series of assumptions and templates and layouts in his mind about what he believed is true about that person, because this is what's true about people in general. So for him, he felt like that was a great service to a relationship that he'd done that, because he felt it meant that he could be much more understanding and empathetic to the other person, because he'd actually made the effort to do the study and the reflection and reading books and stuff like that. But of course, what was then happening when he was in a situation where someone was talking to him about something, about how they feel or about what they want or don't want or what's going on for them, his definition of listening was not, can I really tune into what they're saying, learn from what they're saying about how they genuinely feel about what they need. No, because he thought he already knew that. He felt like he already knew how the other person feels or how they're likely to feel in different circumstances, and that he already knows what they're likely to want, and that he already knows what they're likely to need. And he also had a whole series of preconceptions and assumptions about how people are supposed to relate in a successful relationship. So he had that set of assumptions as well that he was bringing in. So all of that gave him a great sense of confidence, really, of being able to show up and contribute and be a loving partner. But unfortunately, it meant that he was not really open to or interested in hearing from the other person about their lived experience in the moment in the relationship. So his definition of listening, it turned out, was different from mine. He had decided or learned, or this is what he believed, that when someone is communicating about their feelings, their needs, their thoughts, their inner world, that what they want and need is for someone to sit with them, look at them while they're speaking, perhaps nod occasionally, not interrupt, and maybe say one or two things that might be kind or encouraging at some point during the thing. So in other words, nothing to do with really taking in what the person's saying, all to do with what's the behavior that will have that person feel listened to, sitting still, watching, maintaining eye contact possibly, maybe holding their hand, all of these things to indicate listening. But it's not really listening because the information is not going in and the information is not being metabolized in that person. So from his perspective, he had put a lot of effort and care and love into equipping himself for a successful relationship. And he made a big effort to really listen in his terms of what listening meant. And for me, my definition of what listening is not the same as that. My definition of listening is more to do with, yes, paying attention, yes, being present with that person while they're speaking, but it's to really take in the words that they're using and also to allow myself to be affected by what they're saying and the way they're saying it. So in other words, that feelings occur in my body in response to what they're saying. And actually to really make an effort to try to hear what it is they're trying to convey. So the way I've just described all of that might sound a bit judgmental about this poor man who I was in a relationship with. I actually don't mean it judgmentally, because I think in our lives, we all do the best we can, and we all do what we think will be most helpful. But there are those among us, and I would say this is probably more common for men than for women, because this is how men have been trained as they grow up. A lot of men have anyway. This idea that, you've got to really help your partner to feel loved, feel cared for. Like when they're talking, you don't speak, you watch them, you maybe nod, you're still. And at the end, you don't jump in with your next idea. And that's what listening is. The idea of actually allowing the words and the feeling in the words to permeate into the body, into the heart, into the spirit of the person listening is something that many people have never learned or never come across as a real idea. And it's not that surprising because in our culture, it's not something that we learn at school. There's a whole other side to it, which I explored in that one situation. I mean, this one situation probably took about, 35 seconds. That little interaction I had. Sometimes I don't feel you listening to me. Don't ever say I don't listen. I was forbidden to do that. That was very quick. But it's given me so much food for thought. And the other side of it is my responsibility in the matter. So if I examine it, I know actually that if you say to somebody, sometimes I don't feel you're listening to me, or sometimes I don't feel heard, very likely that person's going to react. Because people usually only say, I don't feel you're listening, or I don't feel heard, when they are happy about something and they think the other person's not paying attention to that. So in other words, it's usually bad news. Like that thing where someone says, we need to talk. If someone says to you, we need to talk, do you immediately assume that they want you to give them a certain time and attention because you want to tell them how amazing you are and how fantastic it is being involved with you? Or do you have a knee-jerk reaction and assume that what they mean is, we need to talk because I've got a problem with you. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with the way you're relating to me. There's an issue, or I'm leaving you. I don't love you anymore. I've found somebody else. Bad news. So if we say to somebody, I don't feel you're listening to me, or I don't feel heard, that's likely to be interpreted as bad news and critical. So I thought about it and thought, what could I have said possibly that might have had more beneficial results? And I think bottom line, what I could have said, and maybe I wasn't able to say that at this point in time, but I can think about it now, would have been something like, some of the time in the last week or so, I felt very unhappy when you and I have been together. I'd really like to tell you about that because I care about you, I love you, and I really would love this to work. But if I keep this to myself, then eventually I won't be able to deal with it any longer. So could I please share with you about this, tell you what I'm feeling, tell you when I feel it, and maybe let you know if there's anything I want to ask of you as a kind of any changes or modifications. Now, if I'd said that in that situation, again, he might have had a reaction, he might not have liked it, but at least he would have had a much better chance of understanding what's going on with me and understanding what actually is my problem in that moment. So I think it's very useful in our relationships to pay attention to our partner, and this applies as well in friendships, colleague relationships, all sorts, any situation where we're communicating with each other, is to ask ourselves, what is that person's concept of listening? What is it to them? And is it the same as mine? And if I don't feel heard or don't feel listened to, can I go a bit more granular on that? What's actually going on with me? What is it that I'm not getting that I want or need? And how can I be a bit more explicit about that? And I think another thing just to acknowledge is very often when people don't feel heard or don't feel listened to, it's because they wanted the other person to make a change and the other person has not made the change. So they then assume, well, they didn't listen or they didn't hear me, which may not be true. I've got another anecdote from years and years ago. I was actually employed at the time and I had a boss who was a woman. And sometimes she would suggest that I did something. And often I would go and do the thing she suggested, but sometimes I didn't. And her response to that would be to give me the suggestion again, but louder and talking more slowly. And then I still didn't do it. And one day, after months of this, she said, Catherine, I think I realised something about you. I said, yeah, what's that? She said, when I suggest something to you and you don't do it, it's not because you didn't hear it. And it's not because you don't understand it. It's because you don't think it's a good idea. I said, that's exactly right. This was a pivotal moment in our relationship. And I think for this woman, it was a pivotal moment in general, because she wasn't used to people thinking her ideas were not a very good idea. So that was a new idea for her. So I think let's also bear that in mind. If we think someone's not listening or not paying attention or not hearing us, it could be they are listening, they are hearing it, but they don't think what we have to say is very important or very valuable or pertinent, or they don't care about it, or we think we're just wrong or stupid or deluded. Now, of course, if they think those things, that's maybe another conversation between us and the other person. So yeah, I think the heading of lack of listening is a significant problem in relationships is true, but what that actually means is much more granular and multi-layered than that. So maybe over the next week or so, perhaps observe yourself. Are you paying attention to other people when they speak? Are you really listening and hearing? Are you just doing the behavior, the presentational behavior, which makes it look like you're listening? Or are you really taking it in? And once taken it in, are you responding in some way? Are you letting them know that you've heard it? in a clear way, so they know that you really heard it? Or are you responding to it? If necessary, are you asking another question if you feel like you're not quite getting the point? And if someone says to you, I feel like you're not listening, or I feel not heard, maybe don't react to that. Maybe let them know, oh, I really don't like hearing that. I really wish you hadn't said that. I'm now in a bit of a panic. I'm now, feeling upset by you saying that. Can we have a conversation? What have I missed? What is it that you don't feel I've heard? And I promise I will really, really try and take it in and just see. Because I think, to me, one of the greatest beauties of relationship is the access we have to the other reality, the other person's reality. It's like a magical world, and our relationship is a magical portal into that world. The way they perceive life, what they pick up on, what they notice, their perceptions, their insights are unique to them and miraculous and beautiful in most cases. So really paying attention to each other, it actually provides such an enormous gift. I first really tuned into this years and years ago when I was doing executive coaching. And most of the time I was working with men, but every now and again I was working with a woman. And I noticed that the men I was working with were a bit more linear in their communication, as in one idea following another. And the women I was working with, this is a generalization, I'm very anecdotal of the few people I worked with, but the women tended more to share in a much more 360-degree kind of a way. So they would start sharing about one thing and then flip across to another thing and then across to another thing. I found this a bit challenging because I felt like I couldn't keep track of what they were saying. I couldn't make sense of it very easily. And I tried to for a while, and I thought, I was going to try something different. I'm going to try completely letting go of trying to really understand it or make sense of it or find a good response to it. I'm just going to just let them speak for as long as they want to and just let myself be led wherever they're wanting to go. And I suppose one parallel to it is a bit like if you are walking up through a forest up the side of a hill. You're with someone who keeps sort of going to another path and across to the right and across to the left and up a bit and down a bit, round in circles, then in a straight line. And if you're trying to get somewhere, that might be a bit unnerving. But if you forget about getting somewhere and just let yourself be followed, you end up with a really juicy appreciation of all the different aspects of the forest and the hillside. So I tried this with some of these women clients. And I remember the first time I did it, I found myself like led into this wonderful land of this person's life perception, which was unique to them, different from mine, very interesting, colourful, surprising. And actually, it didn't cause me to not be able to understand or not be able to make sense of it. It actually caused me to really start to understand who this person was and what their life meant to them and what their experiences meant to them. And it completely transformed my capacity to work with these senior women in executive roles. And it was a gift that I finally allowed myself to do that. So, listening. A wonderful topic, a good topic, and always worth revisiting, I think. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. That's all for today for Truth and Transcendence. As I said before, you can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. The show is now being listened to in 102 countries worldwide, which is so exciting. And thank you so much to you and all the other listeners for helping that to take place. If you'd like to help the word keep spreading, please give a review, a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, tell your friends. And on YouTube, you could also comment on what we've been talking about today. Thank you. Have a wonderful week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. you can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.